Well, thank you for the introduction, and but now for the real introduction. So this is my partner, but for the real introduction, I'm really just the other guy, okay? And I'm happy to be the other guy. So, all right. So what I was asked to do today is to show you what's behind the curtain at the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. So it's what is generally not seen by the public. But the irony is that we are arguably the most transparent facility in the United States, and yet you want me to show you what's not transparent. So that was a little bit of a challenge for me. And because some of you have never been to FMMA before, here's a little bit of our history. So the major reason that we're known around the country, I queried ChatGPT and asked who started the Medical Price Transparency War, and you see what it says. So Dr. Keith Smith and the Surgery Center of Oklahoma. So we are known for our transparent pricing and our honesty in pricing. So that's our claims to fame. So here's a little bit of the history. Keith and I founded the center in 1997. But then it wasn't until about 12 years later that we implemented our transparent pricing model. In 2009, when Todd's boss, Jay Kempton, saw our prices online, he was really in disbelief, couldn't believe that those prices were what they were. But to see if we were real, Jay sent us 10 patients that already had surgical diagnoses, and they were already scheduled for surgery. But when we sent them to our surgeons, 3 of the 10 didn't need surgery. So 30% of that small group would have had unnecessary surgeries. So just that one point, right? You think about what your costs are if you run a business. I mean, 3 unnecessary surgeries. So Jay was pretty stunned, but that was the beginning of our relationship and what culminated in Jay and Keith forming the Free Market Medical Association 5 years later. Okay, and you probably need to know why we started the Surgery Center in the first place, because it's important to know what our intentions were. Prior to starting the Surgery Center in '97, Keith and I were at a local hospital and we were frustrated beyond belief. So bad patient care, horrible, ridiculous charging of the patients, the hospital and the government politics were just sickening us. And I tell people today, and I'm serious about it, that I don't think I'd be practicing medicine today if I had stayed in that system. I mean, it's so broken. So that's really our why. I mean, it really didn't have a lot to do with our incomes. It had more to do with, the whole idea that we wanted to be the antithesis of what the hospitals were. We didn't want to be hypocrites. We really believed in doing no harm. And if we knew that we would do a knee arthroscopy on someone and do good care, but then we'd bankrupt them in the process, we knew that we'd be hypocrites and we'd be doing harm. Okay, so what's behind the curtain? I actually narrowed it down to one major thing, and it's probably the reason you came to this conference. And the bottom line is it is the philosophy that is the free market, okay? But here's what that word means to us, and we're serious about it. So it's our desire that every relationship that we have be based on mutually beneficial exchange or no exchange at all. It means the absence of coercion, right? It means that it could mean for you, you might be able to classify it as 100% carrot and 0% stick. It's the win-win deal. That's the bottom line, right? We look for no coercion in our relationships. So to illustrate this philosophy and how it's all or none for us, I decided kind of as an exercise to present not only the patients, but also our surgeons and our employees as customers. And so the point of the exercise is that when you remove coercion and heavy-handedness from the equation, it's amazing how everyone you deal with begins to look like a customer, okay? So that's where the 3 customers comes in. And what I'm going to do today, begin with the surgeons, because they're really the most complex part of what we do, and they were the first ones who we had to recruit to start the surgery center. Okay, so step one in a mutually beneficial exchange has to be to identify what your customer wants. I mean, how else are you going to sell something to someone? So here are the three things we knew the surgeons wanted. They wanted low risk, high reward. They wanted to work efficiently because ultimately time is money. And they wanted the patients to have a great outcome and a great experience. So we'll take these in turn. How did we lower their financial risk? Okay, number one. In the beginning, we were frugal. We rented instead of buying a surgical facility. Secondly, we purchased mostly used instead of new goods. And what that did was their personal guarantees of the surgeons were way down. Their buy-in was essentially zero. So the risk for them was minimal. The reward part of that ratio is a little trickier because predicting profitability is a little tough when you first start a business. But one of Keith and my biggest surprises was that the surgeons were more interested in their profits being distributed evenly rather than what they would absolutely take home. So we were really surprised by that. And we had witnessed other centers that just for that one reason had imploded because they hadn't paid attention to that. Okay. So from the beginning, our model was always more eat what you kill, and there was no such thing as a passive investor. And one of the ways we made that clear was we included an expulsion clause in our founding documents that kicked someone out if they didn't continue to produce. And one of our interesting stories is that we did have a group of surgeons that kind of stopped using us, and we had to bring them to court because they were saying that they were passive investors, just like that. And we believe if they had won that fight, there wouldn't be a surgery center of Oklahoma right now. So we were glad we had put some precautions there. The second thing that I think that you as a group would be interested in, there's one other safeguard that we did at the beginning. We knew that older and younger partners have disparate interests. So the tendency is for the older doc to want to sell, cash out, and retire, whereas the younger doc really wants monthly income, and he wants a nice place to continue working for the rest of his career, right? So to nip this division in the bud, what we did, we implemented two things that are generally seen in law firms, right? So the first was no buy-in, no buy-out. All of our profits were distributed monthly, and at retirement, a partner only got what was left in his capital account, so not a big cash out. And secondly, we made the surgery center almost impossible to sell. That also helped to decrease that temptation for people. Once again, human nature prevailing. We had some partners a few years ago that pressured us to sell, and we were very thankful that we had put this into place because that's what really stopped that from happening. And I think if they had won, we'd probably still be called the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, but it would just be a name. It wouldn't be in spirit because our mission would have changed 180 degrees from that. Okay. All right. So, let's see. Okay, continuing with rewards. So Keith and I dabble in macroeconomics, and this graph many years ago took our breath away. Over this 50 years, you can see health expenditures increased over 800%. Doctor reimbursement during that time, though, had remained pretty stagnant. So the losers were the doctors and the patients, and the winners were the middlemen, right? The businessmen and the big corporations and the government were the big winners. So when we changed our model 15 years ago, we treated our surgeons like customers. We actually asked them what they wanted to be paid for every surgery that they did. And in every case, to address the inequity, we increased what they had asked us, okay? So, and how's that for Back to the Future concept, right? You pay the people who are actually doing the work, right? Not the middlemen, not the ones gouging. All right. So that's that. Moving on to efficiency, though. Now, I have efficiency listed here as it pertains to the surgeon, but efficiency is such a big part of what we do. I want to spend just a little bit of time on that. So efficiency is a necessity if you're going to live in this free market niche. Okay, you can't do without it. So I want to show you how they're related, but how they're different. So just looking at the formula, you can see that for high efficiency, you have to have high output and low input. And that can be money or goods and services, right? So efficiency keeps your costs low. Low cost enables you to keep your price low. And low price coupled with high quality are the components of high value. Now, the major difference between the two is efficiency is typically unseen. So it's behind the curtain. Patients don't usually see it. But whereas value isn't just seen, but in the free market space, value is the attribute of all attributes. There's nothing else. In a nutshell, value is what you're marketing. Value is what the public sees and judges you by. So with a surgery center, the day that we put our prices online are the day that we actually, challenge the entire United States to compete with us, all right, on value. So it should be clear then, if our desire was to be the value champion of the universe, right, we wouldn't get there if we weren't efficient. So here's what efficiency looks to us, and this is a little more surgery related, but still it'll prove the point, I think. It begins with an efficient facility, and here's the very basics of efficient patient flow. The patient enters the building prepared for surgery in pre-op. If they need a block, it's done there and not in the operating room. And that way we can check our blocks, but we can also not tie up OR time. The patient proceeds to surgery, they go to recovery, and then they're picked up from a different portal on the other side of the building. And I'd say that that's pretty basic, except that Keith and I have really seen some jacked up setups over the years. So we knew kind of what not to do. To this, we have to add the surgeon flow, and efficiency is both for the surgeon and for cost control. So we found that the best ratio of ORs, wait, hold on, let's skip the page. Okay, so it begins with efficient, the facility, and here are the very basics. Okay, to the patient flow, we add the surgeon flow. We attempted to keep the surgeon circle as tight as possible, and if some of you come on the tour, we'll show you exactly what we mean by that. But basically, with the patient, the surgeon has to meet either the patient or the family 3 times. They meet them in pre-op, they meet them in the surgical suite, and then they meet them, the family post-operatively to tell them how the surgery went. So the surgeon, before he goes back to the OR, after doing that, he also might want to dictate, and he might want to see the next patient. And so I haven't counted it, but I would almost bet you that the surgeon at our place can do that probably all in about under 150 steps or something like that. So we made it real efficient. The other thing is supplies. We have to do those very efficiently, but that's a little bit beyond the scope of, I think, what we want to do here today. Okay, this is where we have a lot of fun, and this is operating room efficiency. And again, this is the part that's crucial, both to the surgeon satisfaction, but also to cost control. And here's the pearl. We found that the best ratio of ORs to surgeons is 1.5. So when a surgeon comes to our place, he's allotted 1.5 ORs for his time there. So, and here's what it looks like. Surgeon 1 starts in room 1, flips to the vacant room 2. Surgeon number 2 starts in room 3 and flips in the vacated room 1. And you just keep flipping until the surgery's done. So with virtually no time in between cases. And we call that turnover time. So they both, and this, okay, so what I'm going to tell you now is about the other seen and unseen story. So what's seen is that if a surgeon has, let's say, 5 surgeries, there'll be 4 turnovers and between them. And if done right, all of that gets done with virtually 0 turnover time. Now, sad to say, but at many hospitals, there's about an hour turnover time between. So what would you choose, right? 0 turnover time or 4 1-hour turnover times. That's the seen part. Now, what's unseen are about 4 things that need to happen almost perfectly for this to go off smoothly. And the number one, and most importantly, by far, is a highly trained staff. And what's unique about our staff is that they can do any case thrown at them anytime. So for example, in room 1, the team might do an orthopedic surgery followed by gynecologic surgery followed by tonsillectomy. And there are not many people that can do that, especially in our situation where we have 150 surgeons that came to us last year. They all have their individual nuances. They represent about 7 different specialties, and we're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different surgeries that we do. So the staff that can do that is pretty rare. So okay. The second thing is teamwork and communication that have to happen. And I'm going to tell you a personal story. This just happened last week, but we had an extremely rare, almost certainly fatal event that happened at the surgery center. And the patient, however, came through very well and is now home with no neurologic sequela. And 100% the reason that this patient did so well, and honestly probably wouldn't have done so well at many other places, is because of the teamwork that our staff does. So we were all really pretty emotional last week when this happened. So the third and fourth reasons are much more mundane and have to do with scheduling. So we tightly schedule when a surgeon comes. You can see that if we let a third surgeon come and occupy room 2, then no one would flip and everybody would have to wait. And then the fourth thing is that we arrange the order. And by arranging shorter and longer surgeries, we're able to make them mesh and fit like cogs in a wheel, okay? So those are the 4 things that we do that really make it work. And if we do it right, the surgeon's overjoyed. The patient is happy, and they don't feel at all like they've been rushed, because they're not. It's just very, very organized. And then the third thing is that we've utilized all of our facilities and efficiently, right? We haven't, our spend is minimized. Okay? All right. Now, let's go to the patient now, which is the second customer. And this is our real customer. This is what people usually think of when we talk about customers, right? Well, here's our third seen and unseen. The unseen are all those things that we do for their safety and privacy. So for instance, most folks are shocked when they find out that we don't have electronic medical records. But for instance, we don't, because we believe patient privacy is compromised when their information is digitalized. And we also believe that it's inherently unsafe to become, just completely entranced on a computer screen in an operating room. So a quick story about just how serious we are about our patient privacy. Several years ago, the health department demanded that we give them all of our patient medical records. For starters, it would be really funny to see how many trucks they'd have to back up to load up all of our charts. But when we refused, they actually threatened to take our license. And we had to get our attorney involved. And ultimately, we prevailed because they really had no right to infringe on our patient confidentiality. The sad part of the story, though, I'll tell you, is every other facility in the state of Oklahoma turned over the medical records. So that's how compliant we are, and it's bad. Okay, so what's seen? So these are, this is what's seen is what the patient experiences, and here are the first 2 pages of our monthly surveys, and we divide it into pre-op and day of surgery, and bottom line, they're very close to 100%, and we're really proud of that. Here are pages 3 and 4. But I'll tell you, even with all of this, what stands out are the people that come to us, and it's very common, and they say, we want to have surgery nowhere else in the Surgery Center of Oklahoma, okay? And So I now have to answer the question, why? Why the loyalty and the high patient satisfaction? Well, a lot of things contribute. I mean, our reputations have a lot to do with it. But the secret of all secret sauces, and again, this is the pearl of all pearls, is happy employees, all right? And nothing else really comes close to having happy employees. And so the last few minutes, I'm going to treat our employees as the third customer. Having the best employees in town and retaining most of them for 20, 25 years isn't an accident. And I'm going to tell you 4 pearls that we think are super important when it comes. But the most important, number 1, that our staff walk around with infectious smiles is who we don't hire, okay? If an employee comes on board that doesn't pull their weight, we replace them. And as harsh as it sounds, and I know it does, we believe it's the single most charitable thing that we do for our employees. When you recruit people that love to work like we do, we believe the most poisonous, toxic substance known to man is the non-team player. Team play for us is what makes the difficult days not only tolerable, but actually enjoyable, and it's stuff that we joke about, right, in later times. And that's not what you see in I don't know, most centers and most people that are working hard. Okay, pearl number 2, Keith and I don't micromanage. We manage our staff like the professionals they are, and I'll give you a couple of examples. They make their own schedules that we just say, as long as the work's done, we don't care. You guys make your own schedules. They decide when new employees are needed, because a new employee is a two-edged sword, right? Too many and your income goes down, too little and you're overworked. So we let them make that decision for us. Also, when we do hire, our staff evaluate them, and they give us either a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So we're pretty antithetical to the hospital in this way, we're sure. Okay. Pearl 3, we don't let the surgeons take out their frustrations on our staff. And surprisingly, over the many years, even surgeons that kind of had a little bit of a reputation for being a little persnickety, they don't when the staff meet their needs, and that's what our staff are so good about. It rarely happens. So that's 3. And then the last pearl is we use all of the resources that FMMA has to offer, and we provide our staff with one of the best benefit packages we think in the country. So we self-insure, we provide free health insurance, they have access to DPCs and pharmacy benefits, their out-of-pocket expenses are almost nil. So we treat them like the special individuals that they are, right? So our third customer is truly our secret weapon, okay? All right, that's kind of it in a nutshell. So I'm going to close with 2 slides. This one's of Aristotle, and it's a way of lauding and thanking every one of you here today for pursuing this free market philosophy that's so dear to us and really everyone in the room. You know, sometimes I'm almost embarrassed to give this talk because so much of what we do is so obvious and just plain common sense. And after all, you know, what I'm presenting here is the golden rule, you know, do unto others, or the reverse of that, you know, the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. So it's really the most basic of all of our needs and desires. So the bad guys, though, are clearly the antithesis of this philosophy. But yet, they're having great success in destroying the doctor-patient relationship. So I believe, and I'm sorry about the poor quality of this slide, but I just made it last night. You know, I believe that these large companies are toxic, okay? Just similar to what I described as a non-team player at the surgery center. So I'll leave you with one piece of counsel today. So choosing to do business with all of the great people here and who have such a high moral purpose, right, it is a good thing. But I have to wonder if completely removing these toxic elements is what we really have to do if we really want to attain the peace that we're all looking for of conscience. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lantier. I think we got the light flash, meaning we're moving on to the next session, but we can probably get a couple questions if anybody.
As someone who works for the Kempton Group and who educates members of a self-funded health plan every day on KPP free, like a benefit that we have that utilizes Surgery Center of Oklahoma, I find that what you talked about on getting people in and out quickly, that's one of my biggest talking points. I tell them, like, listen, these folks know what they're doing, and they have their craft and their business down so well that you should be, it is kind of like herding cattle. You should be able to get in, get out, because we've always been taught to think that, oh, if the surgery takes 2 and 3 and 4 hours, that's because, man, that's a good surgeon. They're really intense doing a good job. It's not true. It's because they probably made a mistake. They're having problems. They don't know what they're doing. And so I tell people to feel very confident when they can get you in and out. Man, that's where you want to go, because they know exactly what to do, how to do it, and not waste your time, so you can get home and start healing. So that is one of the biggest talking points that I give when I go out and educate about you guys. So great job.
I just want to say I was lucky enough to have the tour already. And everything he said is so true about how efficient they are. That was one of the first things that impressed me about the whole situation. They thought everything through. And from a customer that has actually gone through the surgery center, me and my family, it is a wonderful experience. My question to you is, how are you teaching others to do what you've done?
Well, that's why FMMA was formed in the first place, right? Because we were on the phone so much, answering people's questions, which we volunteer, obviously. And so anyway, so that's why FMMA was formed. But anybody calls, though, we walk them through everything that we do.
Thank you for the talk. Josh Johnston out of Wisconsin. So staff is the key, as you've said. When you are hiring, are you going out on hiring platforms? Or are you pretty much always word of mouth, or how are you doing?
We always try to recruit from within, or people that our people know, but it's not easy to do. COVID kind of made it harder. And I'll tell you, this isn't exactly your question, but what became a little harder for us when all of the hospitals and the government were throwing all the money at all of this money, and people were making small fortunes, medical personnel. I mean, it started being a little bit harder for us, but that's one of the things that really codified in my mind that money isn't what all of these people are looking for. They're looking for good job situations, good benefits. The average person just really wants to be happy in what they're doing. So we do indeed when we have to do something else, when we don't just get word of mouth referrals. And we hate it, but have to do it.
Just a comment, a turning point for me related to your slide when I was working in the emergency department, and kind of at that point of just feeling a little beaten down by the system, as I went to my box, and in my box was a check made out from Blue Cross Blue Shield for 1 penny, 1 cent, and it was legal tender, and I thought, I'll bet it cost $35 just to process that check. And I thought, if I'd gone out in the waiting room and bandaged that finger, and she gave me 10 cents, I would have made 10 times more. So that was kind of the beginnings of trying to end that toxic relationship.
Well, Keith and I both have, I think, our last Medicare checks for bypass surgeries that we did anesthesia for. And I think for that 4-hour thing, I might have made $150 or something like that. I mean, so, yes.
Just had a question. It looked like a lot of the success of being able to keep the facility efficient is through all the physician involvement. Just wondering how, I know you said you couldn't sell a facility, but Maybe if you could tell a little bit about how you've been able to keep it physician-owned, because in the regulatory environment, that's gotten really difficult. To not have to have a management company or a non-physician owner come in.
Okay. So there were a couple of things we did. And number one, the only radical thing we did from day one, if you want to consider radical, we decided we weren't taking any government money. We didn't want to be under any of the Stark regulations. So Stark 1 was in place when we started. Stark 2 was coming on. But since we didn't take government money, we weren't under any of that. So, and the people that didn't know us thought we were greedy turds. They thought, you don't want to help the elderly. We go, nah, no, you don't quite understand what we're about. So
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
yeah. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks.